Natural Solutions with Dr. J, your source for time-tested and cutting-edge natural medicine approaches to optimize your health. With your host, Dr. J. Sordean. I believe that positive, supportive, loving, and emotionally and intellectually stimulating relationships are a very vital part of each person's healthy life. Without these kind of relationships, human beings cannot develop fully and cannot have a well-rounded and healthy life. Now, creating these relationships requires great communication skills and insights into human behavior. We all develop these to one degree or another just organically, but I think that there are special systems. If we learn them, it really gives us a much better chance of having great relationships in both business, personal, home, and intimate relationships. Natural Solutions with Dr. J is not only simply about healthcare and natural remedies, acupuncture, hypnotherapy, functional medicine. We also explore the larger realm of health and education, and that includes innovations in education. So in this series, in this episode, we're going to be talking with an educator who is on cutting edge of ideas regarding how to improve the educational system. And I will also be mentioning aspects of the Supercharge Student Success programs, which I have developed and I do trainings in around the country and the world. Let's listen in to a new conversation about education. You were on a panel discussing like 5 questions or 6 questions that has to do with education and how education is the mainstream education is not necessarily meeting the needs of students of today. And students in different with different cultural, socioeconomic, and different backgrounds. I know that you are an educator. You have a master's of education. That's from National University.
Yep, that's my educational leadership master's. So it allows me to be a principal or an administrator.
Oh, fantastic! And you're both, right?
Yeah, I'm both because I have my own school. So yeah, I'm both.
So maybe you could describe a little bit about your background, how you got to be in education. I know that you've taught and been part of teaching in the San Francisco Bay Area for 10 years.
Yes.
And that's right. And that was was that what got you interested in doing the master's, or was it prior to that?
Well, you know, I transitioned from corporate America. So I went into teaching because I was in business, and it was like I wasn't satisfied. I felt like I was a warm body. I was an HR manager. So it was to the point.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was working 12 to 15-hour days, and, you're salaried. And then I had my daughter. And I think the final straw was when, she caught the flu. And I was out for a week because you can't drop a, 1-year-old off at the daycare with the flu.
No, you can't. That's true.
So I had called my boss and I said, hey, look, sorry, I'm not coming in again today. My daughter can't keep anything down. And he's like, well, there's nobody here to do your job. I go, I understand that. However, my daughter takes precedent. And he said, well, just drop her off at daycare and come in. And I go, daycare doesn't take sick kids, right, Brad? And he goes, well, they don't. And I'm going, you've got a 2 and a 4-year-old. Why don't you know this? He was like, oh, my wife deals with that. I don't deal with kids. And so at that point, I'm going, this is not really worth it, because you want me to run back in to mediate, one lady spitting in another lady's lunch, really? And I'm like, if I'm going to deal with this, I'm going to go deal with some kids,
Right.
And my sister,
that's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
at least they have an
childish
excuse.
behavior, actually. Huh?
Yes, and these women are in their 50s, and I'm like, hey, you know what? At least the kids have an excuse. They're kids. What's their excuse?
Exactly.
So I was looking for a different career that I could be more fulfilled in, that I could feel like I'm making a difference. And my sister, who has been in mental health for the past 20 years, she's a marriage and family counselor. She is also a school psychologist. She actually just got her doctorate last year as well. We both graduated. So, she was like, you should be a teacher. And I'm like, ew, a teacher? They don't make any money and they got to deal with people's kids. And she was like, no, I think you'd be great. So I tried it. I said, okay, well, there's no harm. There's 45 volunteer hours that you have to do in a classroom. And so I loved it. I loved it. I was like, this is awesome. If I could do this every day, wait, I only have to be here 6 days and I get summers off and I get my weekends back and I get my evenings back. I was sold. I was really sold. So I went into a teaching credential program and knocked that out in 18 months. And I started teaching. And so it was
you have a full teaching credential.
Yes. So I have a K-8 California teaching credential.
K-8. All right. Yeah, I have a California substitute teacher emergency credential, which I've had for like 37 years.
Got one of those too. So because while I was doing my student teaching and doing my curriculum, I was also substituting as well. Right, so right. The cool part about my student teaching is that I got to go into charter schools and I got to go into Montessoris. So I kind of got even private schools. So I kind of got a full picture. And then I went into the public school. So I saw kind of everything that was going on. And then, I did about 10 years in the public school system and realized really quickly that, so this system isn't really designed for learning. Got it. And when I studied, with my credential, and I found out that the education system was not built to educate people and make them successful and make them smart. It was meant to give them basic education for the workforce. It's industrialized. So they need you to know that when we tell you to do something, like you hear a bell ring, that means go to lunch. When you hear the bell ring again, come back from lunch. You need to learn how to follow directions and you need to be a good citizen. So be nice to people, be a good American, and do what we tell you to do. So that's what the system was designed for. So, fast forward over 100 years later, we're still doing the same thing. It's like, it's crazy because now people have different needs. Technology has moved forward and the school system hasn't. So it doesn't serve everybody. So
no, first of all, I don't think I introduced you as Jasmin Johnson.
Oh, okay.
So people don't necessarily know that if they're listening to a podcast. But anyway, also, so you used to be in HR. Like I've done a number of presentations, hour and a half long, credited presentations to they changed it. It used to be Northern California Human Resources Association, and now it's called New Change or something, Human Resources. But I've given some talks to HR people on the use of personality typing to improve communication and reduce bullying and things like that, and improve hiring practices in different companies and different organizational situations. So I've spoken to a lot of HR people too, and I've met a lot of people. So it's very interesting that you started in HR.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a great background because it was, it was a really good training ground for me because I always have a gut feeling about people when I meet people. And I always say I'm really kind of sensitive to, vibes and that sort of thing. Right. When when you're hiring somebody or when you're taking them through a process, I would always be the one going, something isn't quite right about this person. Or, what's going on here? And my boss would be like, well, look at their resume. It's awesome. And I'm like, something's not right, So, and I took that HR, experience and I applied it to my students. I mean, over the last 10 years, I've taught, literally almost all the grades up to about 10th grade. And my focus has mostly been in middle school. So I tell the middle school kids a lot of the time, like, hey, when you're looking for a job, nobody cares about your excuses. They just want you to see if you can get the job done, And so I would use a lot of, so I use a lot of the background that I had and I would tell them like, look, if you have this attitude or if you talk to somebody in this way, this is going to happen. And nobody has really talked to them about that. I mean, even personally in All Aspects Academy, we use personality and learning styles and all that to determine the curriculum because we personalize curriculum for all students. So
fascinating.
So it's personalized education. It's not just I'm throwing you on a Zoom for 2 hours with a bunch of other kids. It's I'm finding out what your learning style is. Okay, are you visual? Are you auditory? What's your learning style? Okay,
so
what's your
so one aspect learning style has to do with like neuro-linguistic programming kind of technology, that one. Okay. And do you also use other personality style and personality typing systems to blend those? I mean, that's something that as a naturopath and someone who's taught lots of class. I've also done substitute teaching, elementary, middle school, high school, in charter schools like the last couple of years. And so I'm kind of know how that applies there, but also with patients and one-on-one and the dynamics of the families that they come to me in a context and an environment that's outside the clinic, but it also has a huge impact upon their health and their success and their mindset too. So I've integrated a lot of different technologies besides just oriental medicine or herbs and acupuncture and that type of functional medicine. So NLP is something I study and I
Hmm.
try to apply and also teach my patients when it's appropriate because that can be really key. And I've also, in some of the schools that I have substituted in, if the curriculum's not clear or the teacher wasn't really clear or something, I say, well, would you like to learn something special?
Hmm.
It's something you probably will never learn in any other school because I didn't learn it. And so I go through like a little experiment. And have you done like NLP questioning to elicit a person's, how their eye movements work?
No, I haven't actually got to that point, but I am developing my own LMS, which is a learning management system, with the Dev Masters, and they actually do the AI to tell how the
Okay,
students are feeling. So it's really
right.
kind of cool because while the students are completing their work, their mood and their eye movements are being tracked. And so when we
Oh,
see,
interesting.
it's
That's something
really,
you actually use in your school.
yes, it's actually being developed right now. I'm working with the team to develop it, and they're the top of the line for AI. So that's part of their LMS. They can tell what subjects a student likes and doesn't like, or how they're feeling that day. So you can know whether to check in with them, or it's
Right.
really, really cool. So, I mean, that would be something you would be interested in seeing,
Yeah, so
definitely.
is that something that's done, does it have to be done live or is everything's online now, right? Yours is
Yeah.
like a virtual school, right?
Yeah. We are
So,
virtual hybrid. Mhm.
right, so and right now almost everything's pretty much virtual,
Virtual. Yeah.
right?
And it is. It's
And
while they're working. So it's being
and
tracked.
and so they have like cameras, like there's a camera that's watching their eye movements and everything while they're actually studying there
Yeah, on their
online?
laptop. Yeah, on their
Wow.
laptop. They are not aware of it. The students aren't aware, but the
Uh-huh.
parents know, of course.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. I
Everybody
was gonna
else
say,
knows,
yeah.
but we don't want the students to cover their laptop camera or feel like
Oh,
they're
yeah,
being
yeah.
watched, but we are
Exactly.
tracking those things through
Uh-huh.
AI.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's
Interesting.
really, really, really cool because it kind of shows their thought process, and we notice what subjects they go to first and which ones they avoid. And then they
Uh-huh.
do the timing. Okay, they spent, 30 minutes on this thing, or they were looking down a lot and looking away a lot. So they might not really like this subject or this style of teaching or this curriculum per se.
I see.
So
I see. Yeah. So all the studies that I've done with respect to how eye movements work with the brain and the brain physiology is like essentially each individual has different eye movements based on the particular functioning. Like if they're visual and they're visually they're either imagining something visually or they're remembering something visually, their eyes are going to go a particular direction every
mhm,
single time. It's invariable, right? And so is
mhm.
that sort of included in the AI? Because if they're reading something and then they suddenly have to think about it and they have to think about it visually, their eyes unavoidably will go somewhere unless they're being monitored, and still you can't really fake it. I mean, I've
Yeah.
tried to. And so is that part of it? Because my understanding is that there's a certain directionality that usually people have if they're in a feeling mode, if they're kinesthetically operating, right? And so
Mhm.
it might be down and to the right, or it depends on the individual, but
Yes.
often it's that direction. And so if their eyes are going down, maybe they're feeling something, but how do they actually discern what they are feeling versus just a generalized mode?
Well, the AI learns the
Yeah.
student. So
Uh-huh.
the nice part is it does learn the student over time, and that's all tracked. So it collects a
Uh-huh.
lot of data initially, and then it starts spitting out things like, okay, this is out of character for this particular student.
All right, all right, all right.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And so, is there? I know that there are particular emphasis now on STEM and that type of thing. Trying to get more children involved and excited about science and technology and that type of thing. So, is the AI? Does that also like have that component? It says, well, this person maybe is more inclined in that direction, or this person maybe not so inclined, Do you try to create a mesh where everyone has like some STEM interest, or it's more like let's personalize? Because like in Europe, I believe, and some other countries, by in their standard education, they're already kind of tracking people. Okay, this person definitely not an academic type, so let's not like put them into a track to go into college or university, because that's it's kind of pointless for their life. Is
Uh-huh.
there something of that nature that you're doing, or?
No, what we do is just what I do is that I say that we take off all the barriers. So wherever the student wants to go, they have the ability to go. That's why
All right.
it's super important that we offer, a bachelor's degree by the time they graduate from high school. So
I
if
know,
they
I
want
saw
to,
that. I go, whoa,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah. So if they want to accelerate and go really quickly, they can. But
Right.
if they decide that, hey, you know what, I don't really want a bachelor's, and I want to do something else, maybe I want to do a certain vocation, that's where we provide the mentorship and say, hey, okay, you want to
Yeah.
be a chef or you want to be a nurse. So let's find you somebody who's an actual nurse and let's gear and personalize your curriculum to, that science or whatever you want to do. And at that point, they're free to change their mind as well. So,
People
all of
do that.
believe me, when I was in sixth grade, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then after that, I wanted to be a computer scientist. So the students have, I say that the students have the option to actually change their minds without costing their parents a bunch of money. Like,
Yeah.
some people do in college. They change their major and now it's like, oh, you're doing another year, or you're leaving and going to another school and that costs money. And, you're delaying your adulthood instead of, really working on what your passion is or what you think you want to do. So we give the students pretty much an open kind of road and say, hey, pick what you like to do. You can try stuff. So they have the freedom to try different curriculum, different courses. Like if they go, I want to try coding. I'm like, hey, here you go. Take a coding class if you want to. If you don't like it, you can tell me a day in or a few hours in going, I don't really like this. We get rid of the course. You can move on to something else. So we want the students to experience as much as possible so they can understand what they're not choosing, if that makes any sense. So
That makes
they,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, they have the ability to try things without consequence. And if they
Is
just
there uh-huh.
if they
Is
don't
there
like
is
it,
there
then they don't change. They can change if they want
yeah,
to.
is there a certain level of persistence though? If they, I mean, you said, well, they can do it for an hour, they can do it for like a day or something, and if they don't like it, then they can quit. Well, are there certain students who just like do that and then they switch and then they switch and they switch and they don't have a persistence? Because one of the things about success, most really, whatever the definition of success is, most successful people will say, yeah, persistence and actually bumping up against something and then going, oh, this isn't working, and keeping kind of going at it is one element that makes many people successful. So can they switch off and keep switching, or do you have students who just keep switching, or how's that work?
No, I don't, because we're very actually selective with our students. We want the students who are motivated to learn, who kind of already know where they're going, and they
All
just
right.
need those barriers removed. Well, for example, a perfect example would be a student sitting in a classroom, and I noticed this all the time when I was teaching in the classroom, that 95 of your kids, percent of your kids aren't really learning. You've got about 5% who are at the top and they know it already, so they're bored, or you've got, the majority at the bottom, and then you've got the rest in the middle. So I want to basically make sure those kids who are at the top are going, I'm bored, I know this already, don't have to wait for everybody else. They can just move forward. They're motivated. They have the options open to move fast. And then I want to make sure those kids at the bottom who are like, I don't get this, they can slow everything down if they need to and go through it. So I haven't had the experience where any kids jump from thing to thing, because they've already been conditioned to just stick with one thing because it's just how they've experienced school. So they're thinking, I can't. And I want to let them know that, no, if you really, really hate this class, but you're doing it, but you're gritting your teeth, let's just stop and let's reflect and see what you don't like about it. Is it that it doesn't match your learning style? What is it that you don't like? And what I find with the personalized education is that if it fits how they learn and they like it and it's interesting to them, they don't usually change. I mean, it's gotten to the point where some parents and students are like, hey, you pick my classes. You see all my results. You see all my assessment scores. And I'm going, that's true. This is what I think you'll like. And from what you're telling me and what you like to do and your hobbies, you would like this. And they've liked it. They stick with it. So I haven't experienced any kids switching or, saying, oh, I want to do this tomorrow. Now I want to do that. I want to do this. They are really interested in kind of seeing it through because it's new and it's different and it feeds to their, to their learning style and what they're interested in. So they want to see, what does this thing do? What can I do? So now they're intrigued.
It's sort of, I'm not a big expert on Montessori or anything like that, but I know that some of the people in my family have done some Montessori classes in school, where essentially it's student directed, and if they're really interested in something, they just like dig into it and they just keep going. And so it sounds sort of like that it's student interest driven curriculum.
True. I mean, my experience in Montessori, I was at Golden Oak Montessori in Hayward, and what I didn't like, I was in a K2 classroom and I was in a 3-5 classroom. So what I didn't like is that I couldn't tell a student that they were incorrect. They would not let me mark their paper wrong. They wanted the students to come to us. We couldn't say, hey, are you ready to learn? We would have to wait for the student to say, hey, I need help, or hey, I want to learn this right now. So they're given like 5 hours to be able to learn something, but if they don't feel like they want to, then they don't. So like my first week there, I watched the first grader just stare out the window, and I'm going, I can't tell her that, no, you've got to let her work. And then I'm looking over her shoulder and they're like, well, don't put too much pressure on her. I'm like, okay, but I'm looking and she's adding incorrectly. They're like, well, you can't tell her she's wrong. You have to wait for her to realize that and come to you. And so there was 2 teachers in the classroom, and meanwhile, it kind of seemed like the kids were going off making tea, and then, one little group went to go make guacamole, and sometimes the work got done, sometimes it didn't. So it was a little too loosey-goosey for me. So I'm going, if I can't tell them they're wrong, how do they learn? Because that's how learning takes place. I go, okay, this is incorrect, but let me show you. And if I can't say, let me show you, how are they really learning? I mean, a student doesn't know, especially in, K through 2, they don't really understand how their learning happens. You kind of just show them, and then you go from there. So, and then at the end of that, they didn't really have a Montessori high school they could go to. So there's like 5 desks in the classroom, and there's like 15 kids, So now when they go into this high school classroom and they're sitting 45 kids to a desk, how are they going to function? And then after that, in college, how are they going to function in college? Because there's people are going to tell you're wrong. I mean, you're going to get a marked up paper in red ink that says, hey, you're incorrect. Redo this. And how are they going to react emotionally? Are they going to shut down? So I felt like it didn't prepare them. And maybe it might have been that just particular school that I was at, but I felt like it didn't prepare them for life and what they were going to go into. And I believe grit is a really big part of education, teaching them to persevere and try again. I mean, there's not even a try. I know one educator said, he doesn't say try, he always says attempt, because by attempting over and over again, that's how you learn. And if nobody is challenging that, how do you learn? So that was my my experience with Montessori.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm not an expert. I'm not like a great researcher on the different styles of schooling and what their ultimate, their success rate is on exams or on getting into college or graduating and things like that. So I don't really know but I was just curious if it's very interesting though. It's very interesting. I know that in general, we all make mistakes, and that's really important for everyone all students and all children, everyone to realize that even adults make mistakes, and we learn a lot from our mistakes. And correcting those mistakes is important. So I can see why, to say that, well, this isn't this. I mean, in math, one of the pet peeves I have is using calculators so early in school life, and children relying on calculators for things that I think they should be able to do in their heads. I mean, I think there's very few typical people who can't do the math facts are like physically and brain wise incapable of doing math facts.
Yeah.
And I think that should just be burned in your system. I don't think people should rely on calculators. And so there's certain rote things I think are just rote. I mean, maybe I'm old school and maybe that's wrong, but I will go into classrooms and I say, okay, what's 12 plus 10? They say, wait, let me get my calculator. And and this is high school. I'm thinking something is wrong here. Something's not right.
I agree. It kills me. And, for the past 5 years, I've taught math pretty much strictly. So, last year was my last year in the classroom, and I taught, math 7, math 8, and algebra and science as well. But my biggest beef was that the kids didn't know their math facts. How are you in 8th grade and you don't know what 7 times 7 is? You're pulling out a phone or a calculator. And I'm like, that's a 3rd grade standard. And I have to really look at that, especially, when you're dealing with lower income neighborhoods and minority students. I'm going, why don't they know this? And then I'm finding out that, in 3rd grade, they had a teacher who was, their teacher left. And so they had no direction. That person told them to pull out a phone, or they gave them a coloring book or something crazy, and they'd never learned. And then they just kept getting passed along, not based on what they know, but based on, okay, you're 10, so you should be in the 5th grade. Okay, you should now. So now by the time they get to me in the 8th grade, I'm going, I got to prepare you for algebra. And they're going, I don't know what 7 times 7 is. And I'm going, how am I going to teach you algebra? How am I going to teach you, radicals and all this other stuff if you don't have the basics? And I used to tell my 8th graders, I said, 8th grade is your last ditch effort to get it right and utilize all the basic knowledge before high school. And I'm like, if you don't have this, you're not going to be successful in high school. It's going to be very difficult. And so a lot of them are like, I'm bad at math. I'm not good at this. And I'm like, well, you don't have the foundation. So like, we need to prepare you with this foundation. And I wasn't really allowed to do that because it's, you're liable to the district. You're liable to, the school board. They're telling you, look, you got to teach this. And even if they fail, as long as they saw it, then you've done your job. I'm going, no, I have not done my job, because if they don't know, their times tables, they won't see the connections in algebra. How in the world are they going to do this? They can't. And my frustration was they're going, oh, well, they can't learn because, they're poor or they've had trauma in their lives. I'm like, they can't learn because you haven't even spoke to their learning style. You haven't addressed the issues, And, with my kids, you were speaking earlier about adults making mistakes. I would make mistakes on purpose sometimes and wait for them to find out. And so I'd sit there and I'd write a number and they're going, wait, what are you doing? Why did you write this? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Why did I write that? Why is that wrong? And then they caught on and realized I was purposely making mistakes. But
that's brilliant. That's a great teaching style. Did you learn that, or you just picked that up? Because it's really important to actually.
I picked it up. I did it. Actually, I made a mistake one time, and I think it was early teaching. And I remember, one of my mentors says, it's okay, you're human. The kids need to know that even adults make mistakes. And I was like, oh, okay. So I said, well, what if I use the mistake? Because what's funny is a kid will call out a mistake that you do as an adult before they even see their own mistake. They love it. So they're looking for the mistake. Even something as simple as date. They're like, you misspelled January. And I'm going, no, you just don't know how to spell January. And so they're looking for the mistake. And when you're teaching math, it's really cool because all of a sudden I'm transposing numbers. And it's like, okay, I was supposed to write 21, but I wrote 12. Who's going to catch that? And if they're paying attention, they go, hey, you messed up. And I'm like, really? What did I do? And it starts the process. Then they start telling me how I messed up. And, and then you're going, there you go. And now they're more aware. They're looking for the mistake instead of, oh, this is boring, whatever, she's talking, blah, blah, blah. She wants me to take notes, whatever. They're actually looking to see if she make a mistake. Can I call her out? Can I call out the teacher? So, that's something that I used a lot.
That's so interesting. I know that in some of the classes I teach and this personality system called Bank Code, which is blueprint, action, nurturing, knowledge. The knowledge type people, and that's my first place, they tend to see mistakes faster than others, and they really care. They want things to be correct. That's their person. But then there's others who are like the action. They don't care. There can be mistakes all over the place. And so what? Who cares, And so certain personality types, I think, pick up on that more. And so that's really good for those to actually make some mistakes. So they have a chance to also go, oh, hey, wait, what's going on there, And it's fascinating, personality differences in that way.
Yeah, so that would get even the kids who weren't very good at math. They're like, hey, I know, I may not know my math facts, but I know that's wrong, or that's even, and that's what I wanted. Or what I would do is say, okay, everybody, this is the warm up in the morning. And I put, a few problems of what we did the day before, and the kids would do the warm ups. And I said, hey, you can work in groups or you can work by yourself. And I said, it doesn't matter about the answer. just work through it and do what you can. Don't ask me for help. Just do what you can. And if you have to pull out your notes or use your neighbor, that's fine. And so I would go up there and go over the warm up and go, okay, well, what is the answer for number 1? And somebody raised their hand, it's like 8. And another person's like, no, it's not 8, it's 14. And another person's like, no, it's 1.5. And so I start writing all the answers on the board. And so they wouldn't know which ones were right. So I was like, hey, give me all your answers. So sometimes I'd have up to like 10 different answers. And I'm going, okay, I don't even see the answer on the board, but let's keep going. Because now, and then of course you get that one kid who's like 10 million. And it's like, okay, whatever. It's not 10 million, but we have all the answers. And then we work through the problem. And then when we start working through the problem, they start seeing like, oh, the answer could never be this one. Oh, that's what I did wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do next? Okay, let me cross off. Okay, did we flip this? Did we do this? This negative and this negative? Remember, they make a positive. So how's your answer negative? And they start to see like, oh, okay, maybe that's where I messed up. And at the end, we get to look at all those answers and go, okay, this one's right. And we circle the one that's right. Because now they understand, oh, that's how the answer came about. And they realize, well, all the other ones were wrong. And sometimes they even see how you could have gotten the other ones because they're going, oh, so if you multiplied instead of added, you would have gotten that number. So it kind of gets them working and it gets their mind working in a different way. And if that person is, more of a visual person, they can see it. And, if they're more of an auditory, while I'm speaking each step, they're listening. And if they're kinesthetic, they're working, they're writing down notes because they're going, oh, I'm not going to make this mistake again. So they're, I'm trying to feed to different types of learning all at the same time while doing something different that they may not have experienced before.
Right. So in the all aspects academy, that's what it's called, right?
Yes.
So how long has that been around? It's been.
So we are recent. So I actually started with the idea in January, pre-COVID. And I was telling people about it, developing it, and people were going, well, who's going to go to school online? And then COVID hit. And I was really able to accelerate and put into the program everything that I wanted for my classroom, but couldn't do. So I wanted to incorporate technology because I found a lot of students, even though they're growing up in, 2020, they know how to use a cell phone, but they didn't know how to use a computer. They didn't know how to use Microsoft Word. They didn't know how to use certain things. They didn't know how to use the internet for something other than Instagram and YouTube. So I wanted to make sure that they had a platform that they could utilize this tool called a computer as an actual learning tool and not as an entertainment tool. It's not a TV. It's an actual tool. I'm like, this is your library. This is your everything. This is your communication. This is your connection to the world. And so I really wanted to create a program that did that. And that's what I based it on. I also wanted to make sure that we were getting to the nitty gritty and that we were doing the assessments. The assessments are the key piece to personalize their education. So, like we talked about before, learning style, personality, and then actual knowledge of, the curriculum. So math and English, we do 2 really deep tests, and they're assessments. They were kind of relaxed, but the math test is a 14-point test, 44-point test to see exactly where they fall. What skill are they missing? What skills are they strong in? And it kind of guides us. It's a path. And we do that with ELA too, with English language arts, to see what language, if this is not their primary language, how does that work? Or where's their reading level? I mean, some kids, you're thinking, they read really well. And then you come to find out through the test that they don't comprehend anything they read. They're just able to read the words. And so, phonemic awareness, all that stuff. So when I look at that, I can see where their gaps are, and then I can actually gear the curriculum to fill in those gaps. So a lot went into, all aspects and creating things that would work and that would feed into the success of the student. So we actually opened enrollment August 17th, and we started school September 8th, but the program is very flexible. So kids can literally start anytime because they have 12 months from whatever they start to complete their curriculum.
I see. And so this is online plus individual tutoring or group tutoring or something?
No, actually, the hybrid portion, so virtual, it's all independent, and then later on, students, if we want to meet as a group, we can. we're still pretty new in our process, so we don't have a bunch of students who have the same interests who are going to meet together at this point. But that's coming later on down the line, because when we do mentorship, we're actually trying to start a multicultural millionaire mentorship program where kids can be mentored and have access to people who are millionaires, not just millionaires from America, but millionaires from people who are immigrants or from other races or countries and nations, so they can get just an idea and have access to those people. So we want to create that. And then once COVID lifts, we want to do some hybrid stuff, which is where we go to maker spaces and we get to do the robotics and build things, and we get to do fitness classes and cooking classes and science experiments together and field trips. So that's the hybrid portion of it.
All right. And
you still need to socialize.
So the online part is like pre-made? Is it a particular? I know that in various charter schools, they use particular platforms and things of that nature. Is it something of that nature
Yes.
that you use? Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I have a specific platform that I use, and I don't want to just have one curriculum. So all the curriculum is accredited, but students have 5 different choices to pick from. So they supply 5 different types of curriculum. So whether whatever a type of learner that student is and whatever works for that student, so they can use, Lincoln Learning, they can use Bright Thinkers, they can use, Liberty Online, which is the Christian version, so they have an option of what curriculum works for them, and we can mix and match. So it's like, if they really like, this Bright Thinkers curriculum for math, they can use Bright Thinkers for math. If they like Lincoln Learning for English, they can use Lincoln Learning. So we can mix and match, and we're not stuck with, like, for example, in a typical school, if you got one textbook, you got to teach out of that textbook. They're not limited to that. So I don't have any teachers that I hire on my team. I'm the only teacher on staff. But wherever the students are, because it can be done nationwide. So if you're one of my students who are in New York, they can have a New York credentialed teacher teaching them. They can choose to have a teacher, or they can choose to have self-directed. So if you feel, hey, you know what, I've got history down, I need a teacher for math, then we go, okay, let's get you a teacher for this math class. And they have a teacher. The teacher's more of a learning coach and more of a direct tutor than a sit down, listen to me lecture for an hour. Wow. So yeah, it's very laid back. So the student, and matter of fact, the student even has access to 24/7 tutoring. So if they're, up at 3 a.m. and they're working on their homework, they never have to worry about asking their parents for help. They can go on and go, hey, tutor, I've got a question. And they use the chat, and they can chat with that person, or they can schedule some time with their teacher the next day and say, hey, I need clarification on this. And the teacher can then go, okay, cool, let's meet. So there's a lot of supports in place.
Wow. So you have students from all over the world, or just in this country, or what?
I can have students from all over the world. We're actually working on some global expansions because it's a possibility to have students from everywhere. I mean, literally, my parents are immigrants. They're from the Caribbean. And I have cousins that wanted an American education, but they weren't allowed to come here. So, some of them have gone to Britain. Some of them have gone to, Australia. Some of them have gone to Canada. I have a couple cousins in Canada right now because they weren't able to come to America and get American education. Well, my program would actually eliminate that, because now you are taking classes from, American institution. You can be awarded an American degree, and you can still be in your country. So, we are looking to actually partner with different people who build schools in maybe, communities around the world that don't have access and don't have teachers available. They've got a teacher online. As long as they have an internet connection, or they're able to build maybe an internet connection in their area, in their village, or wherever it may be, then they can have access to the curriculum.
Very interesting. So I know that you mentioned that there's a EI component that's very important in emotional intelligence and getting students part of that, and leadership, and personal development. So the school is fairly new, just getting going. And so are those components integrated into it yet? I mean, are they a substantive part, or that's upcoming, or exactly where's that?
So the all the leadership and personal development, that is integrated to their curriculum. So they do have those courses. They have those SEL courses already embedded in there. So they're working on it. But certain things, for example, my husband's going to be leading a program specifically for boys. I'm going to be leading one specifically for girls. that's called the Dapper Dawn Project. And so with that program, he's going to be meeting with the boys and actually putting some of this stuff into play and having discussions and showing them how to tie a tie. Some kids don't know that, you know, and showing them how to interact with people, what's appropriate, how to have chivalry, and how to introduce yourself in an appropriate way, or even code switching, especially students who, you know, and it's students from all cultures, sometimes don't understand how to talk to somebody who's in a position of authority. So instead of saying, hey, you, it's like, no, you're not going to say, hey, you, to someone who's potentially your boss or somebody in a higher position than you. You need to address the person appropriately. So, you know, those things he'll be addressing with them. And that'll be in addition to the curriculum, because, you know, any kid can do some curriculum, but when you put it into play and put it into action and really get in there and have a discussion with other students your age and, you know, an adult who's been there, done that, then now it's more magical.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And so the emotional intelligence portion,
Mm-hmm.
to me, it seems that there has to be a social interaction in which that context and those skills are developed and improved.
Mm-hmm.
So right now it's all online. Is there an online component where the students interact with each other, and that's part of the EI, or is it?
So that is coming.
Uh-huh.
That is actually coming. As I said, we started September 8th. So I wanted to make sure that we had enough students and every student was comfortable with the platform before we started meeting. So when students are in different time zones, it's a little challenging. Yeah. So right now, most of our students are in California, so it's, you know, Pacific time. Some of them are still getting comfortable with the platform. So that's something that's probably going to be coming next month, where the students all meet together. And at this point, most of my students are, you know, from middle school to high school. So it's kind of nice because they're all around the same age group. We are K through 12. So, you know, for the time being, like I said, starting next month, they'll all be able to meet together and they're all around the same age. They're all, you know, 6th through 9th grade. So that'll be kind of nice. And they all live in different areas, you know, so it'll be really cool. So, yeah.
So is it structured kind of like a charter school, but it's not charter, it's private?
No, we are not charter, we are for profit. And that was done purposely because I wanted to make sure that parents and students and I had the flexibility to do whatever the student needed to be successful and give the families the biggest options. So at times with nonprofits, you have a board, and sometimes the people on your board may not agree with what you would like to do. And so I wanted to make sure that nothing stopped people from doing what they needed to do for their child, and that the parents had the power. Because I know in the public school system, you know, I was a slave to the school board, I'm a slave to the principal, I'm a slave to the superintendent. If they tell me I can't do something, I can't do it. And I wanted to make sure that, like I said, the parents are in the driver's seat. They can decide, you know, if we want to go on vacation for 3 weeks, go on vacation for 3 weeks. That's fine. Just let me know, you know, or if you feel like, you know, my kid should be excelling faster. And I'm like, okay, let's talk to your kid and you. Let's see what's going on. Do they want to excel faster? If the kid doesn't want to excel faster, I'm going to say, hey, look, they don't really want to excel faster. You know, even though you may want them to, we got to work at their pace because it's all about them. So I wanted to make sure it was child-centered. So that's why we're a for-profit school. But we do have scholarships. I don't turn any students away due to the ability to not be able to pay. And I also allow foster students, kids who are in foster care, to come for free, because they may go from home to home. And usually what falls through the cracks is their education, because they're going from school to school if they switch homes at times. So we want to be the place where literally if they're a first grader, they can still come back 12 years from now, you know, and we have their records. They can log in. So that parent never has to worry, you know, wherever they end up, that kid never has to worry about where are my school records, where's this, where's that, where's my support system. We have it for them.
Wow. So this seems like it would be a full-time plus endeavor for you.
Yes.
So as a educational consultant and all, are you doing that also on the side, or you're pretty much piling all your energy and your efforts into the school right now, and that's where all your skill set is focused?
Yeah, so I am doing educational consulting and I'm doing the school. So I also ran a couple other businesses because I'm in the fitness realm as well. So due to COVID, and I always say it's divine intervention because once, gyms closed down, I couldn't do anything fitness related. My biggest business was Pure Aqua water-based fitness and wellness, where everything was water-based. So we did, aqua kickboxing, aqua Zumba, all that good stuff. Well, once COVID hit, all my personal training clients, all my physical therapy clients, all those people, they couldn't come to the gym anymore. They couldn't go to any pools. And so that kind of shut everything down and allowed me to really run and develop the school. So I'm focusing on that 100% now. And I'm also trying to get out there and make sure parents know they have options. A lot of parents feel trapped, especially with COVID. They feel like, I have to be a teacher and I have to, I have to do their job. And it's like, no, you don't have to do their job, but you can't take control of your child's education. If you feel like they're not getting a fair shake, or if, they have your child sitting on Zoom for 3 hours, playing with their cat, I've seen that, where, you don't feel it's appropriate, you have a choice. It doesn't have to be, a charter or another public school. You have an option where you have control. You are in the driver's seat. So I want to empower parents to do that. And I also, make sure that I can consult with districts, because I've been kind of doing this whole digital thing long before, people were doing this, long before it was, distance learning, quote unquote. I've been doing a flipped classroom for years where my lectures were online, homework was online. Kids would go online to get help. They would text me or email me at night, if they were doing homework and they were stuck, and I could answer back, even if it's 10 p.m. If you're on Gmail, I'm answering back. So I've been kind of doing this all along, and this is just kind of the manifestation of everything that I've been doing all along.
So you had been teaching math for 3 years, you said?
So exclusively for 3 years, math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was in like what kind of school?
Oh, so for the last 3 years, so I was in Vallejo Unified for 4 years, and that was Hogan Middle School. And then I was in Crockett for 1 year, my last year teaching last year. So Crockett is really interesting because they are kind of a small blue collar town. They're right in between, Richmond and Vallejo. So right. They call them Sugar City because they have a C&H factory there.
Oh yeah, exactly, right where the bridge is and all that.
Exactly. So they're very hilly, very beautiful. Very small district. So it is a 3-school district. Meanwhile, Vallejo was, I think in their whole district they have 1,200 students. And when I was in Vallejo at Hogan Middle School, the middle school had 1,200 students. So big difference. Very big difference. Population is similar. So I was finding the same thing.
Population mixed, you mean? Or?
Yeah, it's a mixed population. Yeah. So it's really interesting because the Bay Area, as you move, just like the Bay Area has microclimate, they have microclimates of students as well. So my experience in Hayward was different. At Hayward, I was in, a low performing school that was a bilingual school, bilingual in Spanish. And then, and the next year I was at a school that was high income. They were right outside of Stonebray. They actually Stonebray Elementary. And that was on the top of the hill where literally, they had a gate and the school was outside of the gate and the teachers could not go into the country club because we didn't make enough money for lunch. So, I had that experience where, I had a father come in and tell me, you're turning my daughter into a drone because she has to do homework like everybody else. Why can't she have her own separate homework assignments? Why can't she have everything personalized to her? And I'm going, there is no way I can do that for you, sir. So that experience and having that parent come in who's an entrepreneur, because he's going, I'm an entrepreneur. I didn't really need college. I didn't really need the school thing, but she's going because she has to. It's a different perspective. Or you have those other parents who are like, I want my kid knowing Mandarin, so they enroll their kindergartner in the Mandarin bilingual program so they can have a competitive advantage. And it doesn't matter that they're not Chinese or that they, their family doesn't speak Mandarin. They want their kid to have that advantage. So I went from there to, all these different other schools and schools in the middle. I've been in Oakland and Richmond and just seeing all these different students. And the interesting part is, even though people may have different socioeconomic statuses, kids are all the same. They're all the same. They're just kids. And if you give them what they need and feed them what they need, academically and emotionally, they'll perform. So, my experiences teaching math in Vallejo were that I found some of the smartest kids in math who didn't know they knew math. They would tell me I'm horrible at math. And I'm like, how are you horrible at math when you just did this problem? And you just did this one and this one, and you just aced this test. And they're like, well, because everybody else told me that. And I'm going, I don't care what they told you. This is proof right here. I just taught this to you yesterday and you've mastered it. And once they saw that they had value and they knew this stuff, then there was no stopping them. I literally had, I had the pleasure to have kids in 6th grade. And then the next year I just taught 7th grade math straight. And I had 6th graders who straight failed math, like bombs math, like F math, you know? And I had them the next year and they caught on and they were going, oh, this is what the expectation is. The expectation isn't down here. I don't give an A for putting your name on the paper just because you're supposedly poor, you have trauma. No, I give you an A when you show me you've mastered the curriculum. And so these kids were going from an F to an A, and they're going, how are these kids doing that? I'm going, because they changed their mindset. It's all about their mindset, and it's all about making sure they understand that you can be successful at this. It doesn't matter. And I tell them, I said, when you come in this classroom, we don't care what happened outside. We don't. I said, this is a safe place. This is the learning center. This is where you learn. So whatever is going on outside of this, I said, I've got things going on outside, you know, up here. I said, but when we come in here, this is a safe space. This is where we learn. This is where we, you know, we explore things, and there's never a dumb question or a stupid question. So, you know, it's the great equalizer is what I say when you come in and you set that expectation. Whether, you know, your mom makes $200,000 a year or your mom makes $20,000 a year, you're still expected to do the same thing. I don't care. So, you know, we still want you to have the right mindset. So, you know, that's how I see it.
And so parents will enroll their children in your school.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like you have a fairly high expectation that the parents are going to be highly engaged. Now, there are parents who probably aren't. I mean, you talked about the entrepreneurial dad who wanted the daughter to do certain things, or individualized program. That would be like, it sounds like that'd be like a really ideal person for your school. But if a parent says, well, I really, you know, I want to be involved, but not that involved, because a lot of parents, they don't want to be involved necessarily in education. That's why they just, like, you know, they're freaked out because they're at home and their kids they have to participate in the schooling, and some of them don't want that, right? Are those parents also like readily, warmly accepted in your program, or do parents have to have a certain standard of engagement?
So the parents do have to engage. They're an integral part. I tell parents, I won't require you to do homework with your kids every night, because that's what we have our teachers and our tutors for. So, but you do have to have an interest in your students' education. So I've had parents come to me and go, you know, my kid hates school. I didn't do well in school. You know, we want them in your program so they can just hurry up and finish. And I'm going, you're not really the ideal parent, because when I call you and say, hey, you know, we need to pick your kids' classes, I need you to actually call me back. And I've had that experience where I'm calling this parent and they're going, oh yeah, I'll get to it. And I'm going, the longer you delay, the longer it's going to take your kid to start this program, and your kid's not going to take it seriously. So I'm like, you know, we only have 100 spots. So I really want the students who can benefit the most. I don't want people dragging through my program, you know, just because they want to try to finish quicker. I said, it's not a shortcut. It's really built for creating thinkers and creating lifelong learners. So if the parent is really engaged, the kid won't be engaged either, and it wouldn't be a fit. And it'd be a disservice, because now I can't accept somebody else because this parent's kind of taking up a spot, or this kid's kind of taking up a spot, and they're not utilizing the program, you know, this way. And I tell people, virtual education isn't for everybody. I mean, a lot of the time I felt like we were a babysitter in the public school system. It's like, I don't care if my kid just threw up outside, they're going to school. You know, and that's the way it was. And a lot of the times the kids, I couldn't blame them, because I'm going, like, I had one girl and she was like sick all day. And I'm going, when I taught 6th grade, and I was like, you know, you threw up about 4 times. You know, why can't we call your mom? She's like, my mom's busy. She's at work. And I go, okay, I understand. I'm a mom too. And I said, if my kid throws up once at school, I've got to leave and go get her, because that's my job as a parent. And so she's like, well, she works in Redwood City and we're in Vallejo. And I'm going, it's still her obligation, because now, you know, you can't learn. You're not in a condition to learn. So, you know, the parent has to take responsibility. If they don't see the value in taking responsibility and taking care of that kid physically, you know, let alone, you know, their education, then the program wouldn't work for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. So there's a pretty rigorous application process that you go through.
Yes. So they do have to take 4 assessments, like we kind of talked about in the beginning. They have to take the learning style, personality, career inventory, and then the ELA and math test. So they take all those, and then we sit there after each kind of test. I present it to the kids and the parents, and I go, look, this is the type of learner your kid is. And a lot of the times the kids be like, that's me. Yeah, I got it. They get really excited because nobody ever sits down in a classroom when you've got about 32 kids and goes, hey, this is how you learn. This is what, this is what your personality type is. This is what you do. And, parents and kids alike, they're like, that's what I do. That's me. That's me. And they get really excited because now we're starting this personal development. It's about me and my success, not about us as a class, or not about me getting in trouble, which is usually when, kids get that one-on-one. It's when you're being sent to the principal's office or during a parent-teacher conference. It's like, oh, they do this. They're not doing this. So at this point, everything that we're working towards when we do all these assessments is discovering who they are and who they're going to become as a person and how to make them successful. So it's very empowering. So even though it's a little rigorous, and I created the system and I was like, this is really rigorous. But when I get to the end and that parent gets that 78-page report or 84-page report all about their kid, they're like, wow. They really sit down and go, wow, somebody took the time out to really see what makes my kid tick, to really hit all the points and make sure they're successful going forward in the future. So now with this information, it's kind of like when the doctor tells you, you've got high blood pressure. Now you got to do something about it, right? So that's how I feel with all the assessments. It's like, okay, now this is what we're going to do about it. See all this stuff? See how your kid learns? See, what they're capable of? Well, now let's apply it to their life and let's watch it grow. So that's what the process is.
So do you also do a personality assessment of the parents?
No, we don't. But I spend a lot of time talking to the parent, and it's really interesting because some parents are what I call lawnmower parents, and I've come across a lot of those, and that simply is, I want to make sure the road is really smooth for my child. I don't want them to be able to have any issues. Nothing stands in their way. I will knock out whatever stands in their way. And that's not how students really learn. They've got to learn through experiencing, the ups and downs of life. So I have a lot of parents who go, well, maybe since it's online, if I were to log in as my child, and if they didn't finish something, would I be able to? I'm going, no, you can't. Because they have their own log on and they can see what their child is doing, but they're not able to change things. So I've encountered a lot of parents who want to do it for their kid because they want the best, but that's not what's really best for the kid because they don't get to learn. And so, and that builds character. There's no way you can kind of build grit and character and perseverance unless you go through things. And a lot of parents, they don't understand that. So they want to shelter their kid from that. So when I come across those parents, I'm like, look, or I get the ones who, oh yeah, they're going to be a lawyer. And I talk to the kid and the kid's like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be a this or a that. And I'm going, okay, look, I talked to your kid. This is the deal. This is what they say. Okay. And they're like, well, no. And I'm going, well, we're going to go with what the student's doing or saying they want to do because that's the only way for them to be successful. And you have to let them forge their own path. I haven't come across anybody yet who's kind of, stood their ground and said, no, we're going to design the program for, whatever I want them to be. They usually kind of bend, especially when they see the personality assessments and all this other stuff. And I'm going, okay, see how this leans towards this? And I usually show them career choices for the personality as well. So I'm like, yeah, they said they want to be this, and it's kind of right. It kind of aligns with everything that, they are and how they are and what their interests are. Then the parents go, oh, okay, they're actually an individual. They start to recognize their student as an individual, not as this is my kid and an expression of me, an extension of me.
That's so interesting. I know that in my practice, I do a lot of evaluation of people for natural medicine things. And it can be quite detailed with a lot of this exam, that, and a questionnaire, and then results. And I'd come up with like a report. Sometimes it's pretty thick. I
Okay.
share it over time. I say, okay, this is a report of findings time. And that's sort of my way of dealing with things.
Okay.
I like reports. I'm a knowledge. I like a lot of information. But there's people who can't stand that. And
Yeah.
what I found is that when I knew the personality type of the other person, so example, there's some people who are action type. They just want bullet points.
Yep.
They want to get to the bottom line right away. And so I go, here's this report. We've been going over this little by little. This is the full thing. Would you like me to go through it in detail, or do you want me to just cut to the chase? They say, cut to the chase. How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? And that's all they wanted. And if I went through that whole report, I would have killed it. They wouldn't have gone along with me. So that's why I was wondering, I often find that understanding the personality type of the other person enables me to communicate in their style so that it's more palatable. Like I speak Japanese, that's my second language. I know some Spanish. I studied a lot of languages, and personality types and speaking in that personality type's language often it creates a better relationship. And if they want to get more healthy and I have a way to get there, I have to communicate it in such a way that they're going to buy in.
Yeah.
and so that's why I find the personality assessments as being very helpful too in that kind of communication process too. And so you're also teaching that to the students so that they can communicate with adults and in the workplace more effectively and that type of thing. Or that's part of the plan anyway. I mean, you just started recently, so.
Yeah, and that's part of it. And like I tell people, especially coming from corporate America, and I said, it does not matter how great your resume is. If they don't like you, they're not going to hire you. And I have done a lot of hiring, and it was just, your resume looks great, but you know what? I don't really like their personality, or what they say goes against what we're about here, the culture of the company. So if they go, if we're all about projects where we work in teams, and that person's not a team player, then they don't really fit our culture. And I told kids, I said, I don't care if you graduated from Stanford. If you can't, go and blend in with that team, they may still hire you, but you're going to be an outsider. And eventually it's not going to be fun for either party. So knowing and understanding, and teaching them that, or how to pick up on things. Sometimes people don't pick up on things. Like, for example, you're talking about personality types. I can usually tell those personality types who want to cut to the chase, and then I will mimic that. So kids need to sometimes learn to recognize that and learn those natural pauses. So, there are some people out there too who they just keep talking. They don't give the person time to respond, or if they stop talking, they're thinking about their next response. They're not really listening. So teaching students to listen and understand what somebody's saying before they form their opinion is really key, I found. And I noticed, in the classroom, a lot of kids have tuned out the teacher. So I would say something and they'd be like, she'll just say it again. And I'm like, I'm not going to repeat myself. And they're going, but why not? I wasn't listening. I'm like, well, why weren't you listening? I'm like, if I'm talking, it's important, So they had to learn that if I said something, because I didn't talk a lot. When I lectured, I had 55 minutes, and usually it's about 15 to 20 minutes lecturing, and then we do independent work. So, because it's kind of, an I do, we do, you do. So, if you didn't catch it, you got to let me know, because I'm not going to sit there and repeat the same thing over and over again. I'm not going to lecture at you for 55 minutes because you tune out, just human nature. Even as an adult, I tune out, if somebody's just kind of droning on. So teaching kids how to listen and teaching adults how to listen, sadly, is a big deal, because, most people don't listen very well. And that's essential in being able to pick up on cues and social cues. And especially a lot of the kids I'm getting in are from different cultures. So, being so close to Silicon Valley, I've had interactions with Silicon Valley, and it's like, I'm hearing from different people, like, yeah, we have to teach them, American things sometimes. So they don't realize that, okay, in America, this is acceptable. In your country, this was acceptable, but it doesn't work here. I mean, they even had to do that for us for professional development when I was at the Mandarin school. So they said, if you are talking to the student who is Chinese and you're in a position of authority and they felt like they did something bad, they're not going to make eye contact, because they're being reprimanded. So they're not going to look you in the eye. But as a teacher who is an American, you're going, look at me when I talk to you. So there's a miscommunication, because the student thinks, oh, I'm being, respectful by not looking at them when they're reprimanding me. And the teacher's going, you're not paying attention. You're not listening to me. So there's that disconnect, but we want to make sure that we bring them together culturally so that they understand, like, okay, the teacher wants you to look at them so they can understand that you're on the same level, you're connecting, not, and so it's really interesting in making sure that, we understand where that student's culture is coming from, and where they're going into, what kind of workplace they're going into, what they may encounter. And, a lot of the times when people don't look you in the eye when you talk to them, they figure you're not trustworthy. And I'm like, no, they're trustworthy. They're just from a different culture. so
That's
things
exactly
like that.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also, knowing the neurolinguistic programming and eye movements, people will say, oh, well, they aren't looking at me in the eye. Well, yeah, maybe they're thinking about what you just said, and it's triggering a memory, and they're actually, really engaged with what you're doing, because it's like, oh, I understand, and it takes a little processing, but they aren't staring you directly in the eye, and so they may think you're a liar, but it's not. So it's a fascinating. I mean, I find human behavior and human beings extremely interesting.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I lived in Japan for 3 years, so there's the whole Japanese culture that I know. I've lived in a lot of different places around the world, and actually knowing that individuals may or may, it's hard to say. I mean, the people that you're working with are likely to, in the future, have many more intercultural situations, and so life is complex because you shift from one country and culture to the next, and the whole behavioral patterns could be upside down, and actually educating children and getting them to know that, okay, in these circumstances you don't look at them, and in these circumstances you do look at. It can be very complex.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's really important to teach them just body language and being observant. So the more they know about human behavior, and the more they're aware of their own behavior, they can adjust. Right. So,
Yes.
So if they're thrown into a situation that's foreign to them, and it's like, oh, what do I do? I'm like, I want them to know, okay, relax, look around, observe, be observant. Okay, let's try to figure it out. What you know about, human interaction and body language and just everything. Use all of your senses to kind of gauge what's going on around you. And a lot of the times we don't slow everything down for students to be able to do that. Everything's being thrown at them. Boom, 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 boom. Do this, do that, do that. They don't get a chance to just kind of go, okay, let me look around my surroundings. Let me try to understand what's going on here and understand themselves. Because a lot of the time, students, especially when they're younger, they just react. Something happens, they react. And we want to teach them that, no, calm down, think about it before you react. And, in corporate America, we see it all the time. It's like, oh, this person thought that this email was aggressive, so they reacted, and I'm going, wait, stop. That's not what they said in the email. They're like, well, that's what I read. I'm like, well, I have the email pulled up here, and that's not what they said. That's what they thought was going on because of how they were reading it or their perception. And so we want to basically teach students, like, you can't understand everything that will go on and anticipate every single, idiosyncrasy that may happen. But you can at least be aware of your own feelings and aware of the situation to kind of pick up on what's going on, rather than just having a reaction or, like a knee-jerk reaction.
Right. So it's more of a response versus a reaction.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And that's what you'll find in the classroom. I know when I had behavior problems, I would try different tactics that nobody else was using. So, for that kid who was purposely trying to, throw a wisecrack out there or disrupt the whole learning, I'd go, okay, or I ignore it. And they're like, I keep pushing that button, she's ignoring it. And all the other students are ignoring it. And they're going, this isn't working, this is weird. Or what I'll do is they go, I don't want to be here. I'm like, okay, bye, you can go right next door. And they're like, I can leave? Yeah, you said you don't want to be here. I wouldn't want to hold you against your will. So, and then they go, wait, nobody's ever done that, so it's the opposite reaction. So I would do something where it would throw them off and make them think. And they go, well, I don't want to leave because maybe I'll miss out on something. Or they'll go, fine, I'll leave. And then they leave. And then it's just like, nothing was different. Nothing changed. They're just not a part of the group anymore. And they go, well, I didn't want that to happen. So, we want the kids not to just have a reaction. We want them to, think about things before they act. And that's a really important part of adulthood, and avoiding mistakes instead of, trying to, mow all those mistakes down or try to mow all those situations down and make it nice and smooth. We want to know that when they come to, something that feels insurmountable, they need to take inventory of themselves and the situation and then react.
And one last thing, I know that this is beyond what we originally talked about, you know, doing half hour, but it's said so much that the attention span of the typical, at least American,
Mhm,
um, maybe worldwide, has gradually gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. Like in 1995, maybe it was 12 seconds, and
mhm.
and like 5 years ago, it was 8 seconds. And so, is there any insight that you have as why that's happening? And I mean, certainly in a teaching situation, if a person's attention span's 8 seconds or 5 seconds, or even in sales, they say you have 3 seconds to catch their attention or they're
Mhm.
gone. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you integrate that into a curriculum that holds someone's attention long enough that they're actually going to learn?
If it's interesting, like I always talk about my daughter. My daughter is going to be 13 next month, and you know, she is a quick
Congratulations.
learner. Thank you. She's a quick learner. And if something seems kind of boring to her, she's like, next. But if she's interested in it, she could sit up there and watch YouTube videos for hours. And I'm like, are you seriously watching this person fill a bathtub with peanuts? Okay. And now you're watching this, and it's like it'll be hours and hours and hours. Or the favorite one she does is watch somebody else play a video game for hours. And I'm going, but you're not playing the game, you're watching them play the game. And she's like, yeah, it's interesting. And so I think if you tap into what they're interested in, they'll pay attention. It's
Yeah,
only,
but what if it's just like wasted heartbeats? I mean, like when I've gone into classrooms as a substitute teacher, I'll
uh-huh,
say, and they'll say, well, why are you here if you're so and so, so and so? You're a doctor and this and that. I go,
uh-huh.
well, because I have daughters, and my two daughters, I want other people in the world along with them who are smart and bright and engaged who can solve problems. That's one of the reasons why I'm here, because I want to somehow contribute to other people supporting my daughters and having this interaction. And also, I say that, listen, I have so many heartbeats in my life. You have so many in your life. You may not realize the value of your heartbeats, but I don't want my time to be wasted. If I'm
Mhm,
going to say something or teach something, I want it to be really valuable, something contributes to you because I have so many heartbeats. So,
mhm.
you know, if someone's watching video games of somebody doing video games for like hours on it, okay, that's fine. I think that's a waste of heartbeats.
It so is. And,
You know?
I try to make sure that, and when I was in the classroom, I tried to keep it really fresh. So sometimes for science, when we would have a Wednesday, it'd be a shorter day. So it'd be a 40-minute class. We would watch Mythbusters, and we wouldn't watch the whole Mythbusters. We're
Right,
watching one myth, and one myth's probably about 5 minutes.
right.
And so what I would do is have them interact. I was like, okay, if they drop a penny from the Empire State Building, would it kill somebody if it hit somebody below? And I put that myth up there. And now they're going, I don't know. That's weird if they've never seen it before. And sometimes, I have kids who really like the Discovery Channel and they've seen it before. And I'm like, don't ruin it. But they'd have a worksheet and it's like, talk about it amongst yourselves. And then they'd actually watch it. And then I'd pause it and I go, okay, what do you think is going to happen? Now I'm creating that, okay, it's small increments of changing what you're doing. You're still working on science, but you're stopping and you're changing gears so that
Right.
they've got to think. They're not in that same thought pattern. It's like, oh wait, now she stopped the video. Now she's asking us, what do they do? How are they testing it? Okay, what's their hypothesis? Now we're using scientific methods. They don't realize it. I'm asking these questions, but they're not realizing they're filling in this worksheet that's really the scientific method disguised as a worksheet, you know, but they're thinking about different things. So now it's not just science, but they're interacting with the curriculum. So I think it's
Exactly.
important to interact with the curriculum in little bits and pieces because that's what they like about a video game, right? They don't just keep on going on the same path. They're jumping over things, they're killing things, it's maybe the same game, but they're doing different things. They're interacting with different things along the way. And I think that's what's important. I know when I taught kindergarten, they told me it's 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And so they're like, you need to plan, a lot of curriculum because they're attention spans. And I understood it. I'm like, okay, but we're planning all this stuff, but you read them a story for like 45 minutes and they were engaged. They were at the edge of their seats. So, it's a matter of, interacting with the students and having them interact with the curriculum, in a way that stimulates their minds, where they don't just feel like they're sitting here and, okay, yeah, here we go again. This really long paragraph about, nothing that I care about. But now you're talking about velocity. And before I couldn't get you to talk about velocity. at a penny, or miles per hour and calculating miles per hour. Because I'm like, well, what's the equation that they did? They're like, oh, they said it was this divided by this, and I'm like, okay, well, work on the equation in your root. Let's see if you guys get the right answers that they did. And so now they're doing math, they're doing all this other stuff to try to be right and try to, try to. It's kind of like gamifying it. So if they feel like it's more of a game and more of an experience than just learning about velocity or science, then they're going to be interacting with it more.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense. So gamification and pattern interrupts. You know that term? Yeah,
Yes.
that's exactly what it reminded me of. That where you go, okay, now let's watch this, and then you stop it.
Yeah.
And they're going, huh? And it keeps waking up the brain when the brain is kind of like getting into this monotonous kind of, oh, this is boring. What happened? What happened? Yeah.
And I had it's really funny because I would have when I was a teacher, I'd have principals come in and go, well, that was way too fast. How are they understanding all this? And I'm like, no, they like this. For example, we used to do sometimes the weather report, and that weather guy on channel 2, he talks fast. And so while he's talking about the weather, I'm going, okay, well, what did he say the weather was going to be tomorrow? And they're like, well, I think I heard. And I'm like, did you hear that? So they're like, okay, let's go back and listen to it again. But they're able to catch the information and write it down and record it. Or they go, next time around, I've got to really listen. I've really got to pay attention so I catch it. So, if you kind of make it so that, like you said, pattern interruption, they're not just listening to this really long thing. You're going, boom. Okay, now let's look at what you just heard. Let's go back. And so, it teaches them to recall information, and it also teaches them to pick out what's important. And that's what you want them to be able to do. Because half the time these kids are like, okay, I read this thing. Okay, what'd you get out of it? They're like, I don't know. But if you break it down into small little pieces and they understand what your expectation is, what you want them to learn, and what they should be taking from that information, then now, it's not boring anymore. They understand. So now when they're in a monotonous conversation, they can kind of pick out, okay, I kind of got to pay attention to this because they're going to expect me to know this. So I'm going to pay attention to this, but the rest of the stuff, I'm going to hear it, but So it teaches them to do that, because that's something that I know I did in college, where it's like you're sitting there for a 3-hour lecture and it's like, okay, what did he say the midterm was going to be on? Okay, so he's just telling a story right now. He's going to tell that story for about an hour and a half. So I can just enjoy the story, or I can, take a bathroom break or whatever. But I know that when he gets to this part, I'm going to have to really pay attention. So we want those kids to be able to have those skills and even bring that to the workplace. Like, okay, this is all the noise. I call it noise sometimes. This is all the noise going on, but what do you really need to know? What are the facts that you need to know? What do you need to learn? What is the expectation? What are you getting out of this? And that's why also in my classroom, when the kids come in, the learning target is on the board. This is by the end of the class, you want to learn A, B, and C. So they know. A lot of the times you go into teachers' classrooms and there's no learning expectation. They don't know what they're supposed to learn. So they're bored out of their minds because you're talking at that, you're talking at them for 55 minutes. And it's like, okay, what am I supposed to get from this? If you let them know immediately, like, look, by the end of this class, you need to know how to divide fractions. You need to know how to add like terms. You need to know how to do this. They'll be listening for it. And they'll know whether they've got it or not. By the end of the class, they're like, I'm a little fuzzy on this, but I think I got this and I think I've got that. So, that kind of feeds into them taking control of their education instead of you placing the education upon them. Now they have an active role.
Sounds great. Well, this has been really fun conversation. Yeah. And so this is Jasmin Johnson, and she is the founder and principal also of All Aspects Academy. And where is it located? I mean, I know it's a virtual thing.
So we do have a base in Oakland. Yeah. So we are based in Oakland, but we are virtual. So, I literally say you could do our program in China, or you can do it right down the street in Richmond. So you do it anywhere. So we are virtual. We are Bay Area based. So when we start to do hybrid things, we will be doing things across the Bay Area.
Okay. And so for those who are listening on the podcast, you can get information about the school and how to contact Jasmin Johnson at in the notes of the podcast. So come back to the podcast, you'll get the notes, and you can contact the school because it sounds like a fantastic place to learn. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Natural Solutions with Dr. J with a focus on education. you can contact us. We would appreciate it if you would come and be part of the Supercharged Student Success Teacher Nurturing Training page on Facebook. That's Supercharged Student Success Teacher Nurturing Training on Facebook. See you there.